if I was to sort of step out of this whole thing for a second and think about, and I think for the audience listening especially, now I know that you've traveled quite a bit, and I'm not sure exactly, when you were going through this whole journey of, doing this course. And by the way, for the audience listening, I'll put the link in the show notes. Is that when you were going through this journey, where were you based at that time? And how did your family and friends feel, or did you share this with them? Because I know that this topic is very taboo, and Indian parents rarely have that birds and the bees talk. And to be honest, this is the first time I'm having the birds and the bees talk, in and it's actually coming from an expert, so I'm actually very lucky. But for most people, they're not going to get this chance, and you know, some people go their whole life never having even heard about any of this or experienced any of this, and they have this half-ass or negative experience their whole life, and it's all just traumatic. I know I'm saying a lot, but where I'm going with this is, if I was to sort of simplify, is number one, so at the time when you were going through this learning phase, or when you were getting exposed to this course and you were learning about all these different elements, is this a conversation that you were having with friends and family? And if not, how did your parents or people around you react to some of this stuff? I'd be really curious, because of cultural norms, and because you're also a woman, and there's just so much
Mm,
unsaid,
yes.
read between the lines. You could
Mm,
call it nonsense, you could call it pressure, you could call whatever bucket we want to put that in.
yeah.
And of course, I haven't had that lived experience, because being a guy, just, it's a whole another chapter. I think we'll explore that later, in a little bit later in the
Mm,
conversation, when we go deeper into, role specific, gender specific, maybe some of those elements. I don't know,
mm,
but I would be really curious to learn about how that experience was for you to go through it, and then at some point start talk, because there was some point of convergence where you started to publicly talk about these
yes. Yeah.
things. So
True.
I'd really want to for you to talk about it, and also that would give the audience, especially for the women, and I guess the men as well,
Mm, mm,
something relatable, in terms of, because they're probably struggling with, how do I have this conversation even with my partner?
mm,
Forget alone parents or friends and family,
mm,
they could be struggling with. So that would be
mm.
great to learn from you of your journey, and during that specific phase, how you sort of overcame some of
Mm.
those hurdles and
Yeah.
objections and
Mm,
negative feedback,
mm.
I could call it. Yeah, just again,
Well,
just more curious about what that emotional state for you was
mm,
at that point. Yeah.
mm, takes me back. Well, I started my this exploration in 2014. And I think for 6 months up to 1 year, I was in silos. I didn't, because up till then, I used to be that woman who, amongst friends, used to keep quiet when they used to talk about sex, self-pleasure, having an orgasm, because I didn't, I had no experience whatsoever with that. Um, so I prefer to be quiet up till when I started taking responsibility of educating myself about my own sexual health and taking my power back about reclaiming and restoring my sexual health and having more sexual freedom and more responsibility. Uh, so I think for a good 1 year, I was just practicing very privately um, on myself, of course, embodying, because it's learning by doing. That's how you create neuroplasticity. That's how you create new behavior, is by repetition, and you learn by experiencing. It's an embodied learning. And I don't think I had a conversation with my parents, though I did have a conversation with my sister-in-law, who I am very close to. And she had asked me, oh, so you're actually learning how to masturbate. And at that point of time, I was like, oh gosh, there's so much of reductive thinking about what sexual health is and what sexual, I was actually disappointed in terms of how people perceived sexual health and or sex education as through just by understanding ejaculation and orgasm. It is so much more. And that is when I started, there has to be a better way to learn and to teach, because I started slowly speaking to friends after, I think, 2 years, how I actually went and because I had a lot of experience and I had a training as I had a lot of experience based on my own body, because I know if I could do it, I can help other people do it too. I can help my friends do it too. And I started working in a veiled way as a sexuality coach with women who had issues regarding painful sex, numbness, or an orgasmia, inability to orgasm. And it was similar to what my conditions were. So through my own direct experience, I could share. I could coach them that, these practices help. Why don't you try them? Because they help me as well. And I could see some sort of breakthroughs in their life. And that motivated me that, okay, now I think I'm extremely interested in pursuing this further as an education modality. And soon, lockdown happened, and I had done my ISTA level 1 training, in which I learned about the energetic aspects of sexuality. And I met my teacher, who was Elaine Young. She's a somatic sexologist and or a sexological body worker. And there was a session about understanding the body through a training. But however, lockdown happened then, and I couldn't go for that training, which happens in Australia. So what I started doing then was I started having safer sex conversations, and it was global. I started because I have a counseling background, so I started offering emotional support to intimacy and sex festivals, which were online across the world, where if somebody was having a breakdown, if somebody was having some sort of emotional issues, we were all trauma informed and we could help them. But essentially we were just holding space for them to express what they were feeling in their bodies during these conferences. And when lockdown finally opened up, that's when I had a conversation. Up till then, I was in Bombay. And then when I came back home to Delhi, that's when I really sat my parents down and said, this is what I want to do. Well, also after lockdown, I was in a sabbatical for 2 years, where I was just recovering from my work life, my imbalanced work-life situation, and the toxicity around being a art director, working long hours, having no understanding of, because there is so much of dissociation and disembodiment in that work. It's all brain, and you constantly are pushing your body to deliver, to do things, pushing other people to deliver and do things. It just took a lot of mental toll on my own body, and I had to take a 2-year break. And that's when I really prepared myself and said, and I consciously went and had conversation around people, with people, about what does sexuality mean to you? What does fulfillment mean to you? How do you want to live? And it's not about just being sexual. But in the end, I realized the only answer I was getting was everybody wants to have freedom and choice in their life, in any sphere. And why should sexuality be left out? It's not supposed to be dependent. How can you completely live with authority of your own body and pleasure and be self-regulated all the time? Use that self-regulated energy in other aspects of your life. And sexuality is personal. It's different. It could be what a healthy sex life is may look completely different to me than to you. to accepting those differences as well, accepting those unmet needs as well, and looking at it as a lens of how can it make you more wholesome as a human being, rather than we utilizing manipulation, seduction, distorted perception to get something. Because it's always, even the information that I see about sex it's so aspirational, but I wanted to dilute that conversation. Sex is not aspirational. It's like breath. Pleasure is readily available to you as a human being, even sitting in this chair. And I'm not talking about just sexual pleasure that people only think pleasure is localizing their genitalia. And I wanted to open up more conversation regarding the same, because you are not your brain. You are your nervous system, and your nervous system is all over the arms, the legs. Wherever you have nerves, you have the capacity to feel pleasure. You have the capacity to regulate yourself. You have the capacity to feel satisfied in your body through your felt senses. And that is what people had tuned themselves out of feeling. They had suppressed those or disassociated themselves from their felt sense to a degree that they were only mental. And it happens because of cultural conditioning. It happens because of censoring. When we are children, we're just told to shut ourselves down constantly. When we become adults, we are also told ourselves to shut down consistently, like constantly. This is the barrage of information. Don't be yourself, be someone else. That's what the information is. And so the body is constantly, if you say your body is like an operating system, it's constantly sending you emails that look at me, there is something problem. The brain is just like the wire is gone. My job is to link the wire between the two and say, boss, there's an SOS. There is an SOS that you have to look at the whole operating system rather than just look at the brain. So that was the whole thing. That was that understanding of what pleasure really means to you. It's not localized just in your genitals, and it's not reductive in that sense. It's all over. You have the ability to feel deeply satisfied in your humane body, wherever you are, in whatever capacity you have. And I think with that understanding, there is no other word that's coming into mind except saying sovereignty.